All right, quick pause before today's episode. Let's talk about data accuracy because I watched too many brands make huge mistakes based on broken attribution. If your Google Analytics revenue doesn't match your Shopify dashboard, which I know happens for most, or Meta claims credit for sales that actually came from email, you're making very expensive guesses about what's actually working. And from my years at Shopify working with many brands, I can tell you this, the problem is costing you real money every single day. Now, Little Data fixes this, and they're trusted by over 2,000 Shopify brands for conversion tracking that actually works. They create one reliable foundation across everything that you're already using. Think about Google Analytics for, revenue tracking, Meta, Google, TikTok, for better ad attribution. Think about Klaviyo, Attentive, like for your flows, and even Recharge, for example, if you're running a subscription business. And so the best part is that you set it up once and it just works. Like there's no maintenance, there's no technical headaches. It just scales as you grow your business. So if you're kind of tired of making decisions based on data that you don't completely trust, totally head over to littledata.io. They and their solution will help you fix your attribution foundation so that you have accurate data. So littledata.io. All right, let's go jump into today's episode.
You're listening to E-commerce Fastlane, the podcast show to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company, powered by Shopify. Listen to real conversations with partners and subject matter experts as they share proven practical strategies, platforms, and the best Shopify apps to help you accelerate your business. The time is now for you to improve efficiencies, grow revenue, profit, and lifetime customer loyalty. Please welcome your host, startup founder and strategic advisor, Steve Hutt.
Well, hey there. Welcome back to E-commerce Fastlane. I am your host, Steve Hutt. Now, if you've been in this game for more than a minute or so, you know this feeling, especially with BFCM just passing. You pour a lot of budget into Meta and Google, and you're literally you're fighting tooth and nail for attention. There's a lot of competition out there, and likely getting a lot of traffic, but the revenue a lot of times doesn't necessarily follow the same curve. And I think there's this typical kind of, I'm going to call it knee-jerk reaction, but, doing things like, hey, let's change the color button, or, hey, let's, copy Amazon's layout, because clearly they're doing something right. Or, let's install a countdown timer or something, right? There's always something that people always want to do. And that's the reason why I have my guest on here today, because he believes, and his approach is that these kind of quote unquote best practices playbook is kind of fundamentally broken. And my guest is Anthony Morgan, and he's the founder and CEO of a company called Enavi, and they're at Enavi, so it's ENAVI.co. Now, Anthony, he's built quite a reputation. I did a little research before recording about being a little bit of a contrarian, I'm going to say it, about in the optimization space. Like a lot of agencies are really trying to maybe sell you on velocity testing, where Anthony kind of argues that maybe 80% of the work should really happen before a test even goes live. It's quite interesting. He has some great methodologies, this human-obsessed CRO. He has some great diagnostic framework. I don't want to get into it too much because I think I really want to hear it from him. I got my notepad open here because I feel blessed. I get the opportunity, life of learning is my mantra, and I'm dying to learn more about his contrarian approach and kind of what we can both learn together. So, hi Anthony, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. I'm excited to dive into things.
Yeah, this is wild. Look, CRO is definitely, any marketer knows that it completely makes sense. But I really want to hear a little bit about your bold claim, where you believe that CRO is broken. And we see, I've even produced these top 10 Shopify hacks and trying to figure out ways of how you can improve your conversion rate. But you're saying that maybe mimicking other brands is actually a trap. So can you talk a bit about what you've learned and kind of how you're positioning your company and your methodology?
Yeah, so quick high level Enavi, our approach to CRO is what we call human obsessed CRO. And really what that means is when it comes to improving your on-site performance, when it comes to improving your performance in general, getting into the mind of the customer is crucial. And so we like to get into the mind of the customer, understand why they buy, why they don't buy, and then leverage that to improve your on-site performance, to take those learnings into other marketing channels. They shouldn't just be siloed to your website, but they should be carried well beyond that. And in many cases, those learnings could be disruptive and can be disrupted for the business, the trajectory of the business, how you're thinking about who your customer is. There's so much that you can use as a result of that. And so that's really core to our approach. And through that is research, right? In order to learn more about your customer, you have to have research to really back your knowledge. And you can't base it off of assumptions or how you feel, or even if you were one day the customer, right? If let's say you're the founder and you built this product for yourself, the chances are as you scale and as you grow, you become further and further from who your core customer actually is, even if you built the product to solve a problem that you had or to complete a job that you had. And so that's the core thing that we believe. And that's when, Steve said, 80% of the effort comes before you even launch a test. And that's where the research comes in, right? We believe that research needs to drive forward how you're thinking about improving performance, especially when it comes to CRO and on-site performance.
It's interesting though, a lot of like tools and stuff that I see out in the market, they talk about what your conversion rate actually is. And I watched a YouTube video with you and you're like, very clearly that the conversion rate is actually a vanity metric that really hides the real story that's actually going on. And you feel that like that single number is very misleading. So can you talk a little more about that? Because I want to unpack that, because a lot of people say, oh, what's your conversion rate? Oh, I'm 1.8. And if I was at 1.9 or if I was at 2.0, that would equal X in additional revenue for me. And what should I do to improve that? That's not always necessarily the right way of thinking about it.
Yeah, so I think there's really two things to think about when we talk about how conversion rate is a vanity metric. The first thing, and this comes with like any data point, any metric, is that a single metric on its own is kind of useless if you don't have the context of other metrics to inform what you're actually looking at. Like I could go look at a brand's top line revenue and be like, oh, wow, you guys did 150 million. But if I have no context for their bottom line, they could be, negative 20 million in bottom line,
Yeah.
and that top line looks nice and pretty because it's 9 figures, but really in the context with other data points, you can understand with a fuller picture. And so that's like the number one thing. Conversion rate on its own is really useless. It just doesn't tell you anything. And then the second thing is when it comes to conversion rate is, I would say 95% of the time, it is mostly affected by variables beyond the actual on-site experience and changes that you make to on-site. And what I mean is, if you were to go turn up your paid social ad spend today and look at your conversion rate for what it'll be over the next week after you increase your ad spend, you're going to see that your conversion rate absolutely plummets, especially if that's, campaigns and ad sets that are more prospective and colder audiences, right? The intent of the user shifts. And so as a result, your conversion rate is going to shift.
I see.
And so that's a variable that massively affects it. And so that's the second point there is it's oftentimes affected more by variables that you can't control and that are actually outside of the actual on-site experience.
So interesting. And, I also heard and this is like through the grapevine, through some others that I've been interviewing recently, and a lot of them, they feel marketers, they don't feel confident about their data. They feel that, why is it that Shopify shows one thing, Meta or Google is showing something else, and then another, and then GA is showing something else, even third-party pixel tracking tools and stuff like that. So what's your mindset around, what is actually going on here right now, where there's 20 and 30% disparity between all these different systems, and where is the true source of truth? I just want to understand your mindset about how you guys actually think about CRO and feel that the data that you're actually looking at is actually accurate and is it the source of truth somewhere?
Yeah. I think if you could solve that for the e-commerce industry, you would be a billionaire,
Yep.
And the reality is it's never going to get solved, and it's probably only going to get more complicated and harder to have accurate data, right? Privacy changes, just all the things that come with that has had a massive effect on the quality and the clarity that we can get from the data that we're looking at. And so what we do at eNavi is we try to look at particular platforms for specific types of data. So if I'm looking at order data, let's just give a basic example, and I want to understand what are users commonly pairing together in terms of products in their orders. The best place for me to look at that is going to be Shopify, right? It's going to have a really clear picture. I can honestly use Sidekick and put together a really good prompt, and it would probably give me a really great report on it.
Yeah.
But if I'm wanting to go look at, we'll probably touch on this later, our Intrasite Funnel approach when it comes to how users are navigating through your site, Shopify is very limited. It doesn't go as granular as you need to really understand performance. One example would be when you're looking at Shopify's purchase journey report, it doesn't even show users that view an item, that get to a product page. It skips directly to add to cart. So you have this giant gap of product discovery. You don't know those users that are landing on a home page, how many of those are actually viewing a product? Or those users that land on a collection page, how many of those are actually viewing a product? And so you have a giant gap in terms of product discovery. And so if you're just looking at Shopify for your on-site performance data, it's going to have a massive gap there.
Yeah.
And you just can't go as granular as you can with a tool like GA4.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really depends on what you're trying to uncover as to what should be the source of truth.
I see. I know a lot of people are using either Triple Whale sometimes. This is for paid ad side of it, but Triple Whale or North Beam, I think Hyros, there's a few others out there, Thought Metric. So it's interesting, and all these things are, pretty cheap, multi-touch kind of attribution-y things. Once again, I've read this recently, customers are not coming in on your homepage anymore. So stop thinking that's what they're doing, because they're not. They're all over the map. They're coming in the middle of the funnel, which I think is probably an interesting kind of maybe we should kind of dig into that a bit about your core framework. This whole, you have this thing called, Metric on Fire, and this whole concept around this intrasite funnel. Can you talk, because you have your interesting frameworks, I want to make sure that we get that out into the wild and educate people on the differences, because clearly CRO, I agree with you, in isolation is a vanity metric. It doesn't make any sense. You don't see the big picture. But let's talk about kind of how you're educating people and executing with this intrasite funnel kind of concept.
Yeah. So, it honestly goes back to that first question you asked about CRO or about conversion rate being a vanity metric.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think about on-site performance, conversion rate, we like to view it through the lens of what we call the Intrasite Funnel. And so ultimately what the Intrasite Funnel is it takes the 4 key steps or metrics that lead to a conversion, that lead to a purchase ultimately, and then breaks them up in isolation to look at how users are getting from point A to point B. So the first step is landing to product view. And then within that metric, we have kind of a target baseline. Based off of our internal data set, we've set these target ranges for each step in the Intrasite Funnel. So when we're looking at landing a product view, the target baseline is 50 to 70%. So that means 50% of your users should be viewing a product that land on your site. 50% of your users that land on your homepage should be viewing a product. And then we go further down the Intrasite Funnel to product view, to add to cart to checkout, checkout to purchase, and there's target baselines for each of those. And that's kind of the global Intrasite Funnel. And we take it a step further by segmenting it up, which I'm happy to go into, but I want to stop there, Steve, and see if there's anything we want to talk through on that front.
Yeah, no, that's a really good idea. So it's landing page to a product page view, because what you're saying, I guess that's the initial kind of first kind of friction point. Typically, like I said, they're not going to the homepage, they're not reading the messaging there, yada, yada, yada. It's just they got to go to a product page right away. And that's usually step number 1, I guess, in your core steps. And then, so what happens from there? Is it viewing the product page and then going to add to cart? Is that typically the next step?
Yep. Yeah. So we've got landing to product view.
Okay.
Product view to add to cart. So the percentage of users that land on a product page, how many of those are adding to cart?
I see. Okay, so what this is, I can see where you're going with this, because instead of saying, hey, my conversion rate is 2.5% or something, now you can say, well, fair enough, my conversion rate is 2.5, but my add to cart rate is 6%. And then you can start monitoring these sorts of things. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it gives you clarity and focus, right?
Right.
You can then focus and prioritize your efforts. Because if you're just coming in and like, oh man, our conversion rate is 0.9%, we need to improve it, but you have no idea where users are, where the bottleneck is, good luck trying to figure out how to improve that.
Yeah.
So that's the first step, is if we've got each of these kind of metrics isolated, we can then understand, okay, it's actually users are getting to product pages just fine. They're not adding to cart at the ideal rate, which in our kind of benchmark report is 12 to 18% is where we want to be. So 12% minimum of users that view a product are adding to cart.
I see. So basically people have found the product, but they've decided to not add to cart, and then go like, so then there's, I guess there's a lot of objections that could happen here as reasons why they didn't. If it could be price, I don't know, product information gaps, who knows, trust issues. I mean, there's a million different things that could be as to why they didn't click add to cart. Is that kind of where, because you're isolating that particular metric, is that where like the human brain power of your company goes, okay, well, if this is what the target is, and this is where we're currently at from an add to cart metric, then you can kind of start having a laundry list of things that you could start actually improving upon to see if it makes a difference.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to improving conversion of any metric, the metric you could be trying to, or the conversion that you could be trying to improve could be add to carts, right? We want to get more users to add to cart, because if that happens, it's going to have a positive downstream impact. More users will check out, more users will purchase. And when we're thinking about improving conversion, there's really two levers: increasing motivation and decreasing friction. Anything that we do on the on-site experience to try to improve conversions is going to be using one of those levers. It's going to be increasing motivation, or it's going to be reducing friction.
I see. So we have landing page to product view. We have, I'm writing my notes here. So you have product page view to add to cart. So we kind of go to that step. So someone's added to cart. So now I'm assuming the next step is something around like, did they check out or not? Or has the checkout been initiated or something, I guess. So am I right on that third stage?
Exactly. Yeah. It's add to cart to checkout.
Okay.
Which our target baseline for that is we want 40% of users that add to cart are checking out.
I see. And then, so is this, has the same kind of objections again, so that something may have stopped them from initiating or completing the checkout. And so there's like a cart abandonment of some sort. And so I'm sure there's a lot of things, surprise costs. I mean, especially in Canada, like, oh, no duty and tax in the cart. Oh, wow. Oh, I'm responsible for that. Okay, bye-bye. I'm going to think about it. Or maybe forcing account creations or some complexities. Who knows what's going on? I'm sure there's a whole list of things that you want to do to help maybe motivate and let somebody initiate and complete that checkout.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's one of those things where oftentimes what we'll see brands do is they'll see, oh, we have high cart abandonment, so we need to improve our abandonment flows in our emails.
Okay.
We got to improve the checkout flow. We got to improve the cart flow. Maybe we need to send more emails more frequently. But
probably not.
The reality is like, can it have an impact? Sure. Is it going to make a significant impact on it? No. And that's where we need to understand, why is the customer having friction here? Why are they lacking motivation? And most of the time, if they're abandoning cart, there's some type of friction. Most likely, it could be motivation related too, but understanding that is going to be the root cause that we're trying to solve. Like, you could throw a bunch of ideas at the wall and you may get something that sticks, but you probably won't actually understand what made the difference, right? You won't know what friction, what do we implement that actually reduce friction? But if you go and you actually conduct research to understand, in this case, if you have like cart abandonment issues, there's a variety of things that you can do to understand the underlying kind of root cause. The first thing that I would recommend doing is doing some type of qualitative voice of customer research. And so that could be probably one of these three things I would recommend. Some are easier than others. The easiest one is going to be review mining. Most brands have a plethora of review data. So you can go in and understand what are the things that customers highlighted, like what really motivated them and made them excited about the product, or what are maybe some things that they're talking about in the reviews that we aren't talking about enough on the site. right? That's
Right.
a consistent theme. And the second thing can be like customer support ticket logs. What are the questions that they're asking? Because those are friction points.
Yeah.
Can we better address those on the site, on the product page, maybe
Mhm.
even in the cart? And then the third thing would be like post-purchase surveys where you can ask targeted questions to customers that bought. You could simply ask them what almost stopped you from buying. Or you can even add in your abandonment flow a survey for a period of time to understand why users are not completing that next step and ultimately initiating checkout and then purchasing.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. No, I guess the final one, would be, so I guess the checkout's been initiated. So obviously now this is a successful conversion. I guess if someone starts typing in their credit card information and billing address and all this kind of stuff, and then during that flow, I guess, have somehow dropped off. I think Shop Pay has really helped a lot of that right now by reducing a lot of that friction. But am I right for that fourth kind of step?
Yep. Yeah. So it'll be checkout to purchase. And
Okay.
we shoot for a minimum of 45% of those users
Oh,
that
okay.
initiate
All right.
checkout purchase. And there's one thing that I do want to talk about when it comes to checkout abandonment is oftentimes what we see is brands will default to testing checkout. Like if they're starting to do A/B testing, they're going to go default to running tests on their checkout, whether, it's like adding checkout blocks or just all different kinds of random ideas. We'll see. And the thought is, we're closer to the dollar, right, where they're actually making the purchase. So if we do it here, we're more likely to have an impact. And then they also see 55% of users are abandoning checkout. That's a massive number. We need to fix that.
Right.
Honestly, the juice isn't worth the squeeze oftentimes
Yeah.
on the checkout.
Yeah.
If you were to address those issues further up the funnel, you would have way more of an impact. You can address them preemptively before they even get to checkout. And oftentimes the issues that we see in checkout, the brands that struggle, that don't hit the baseline of 45%, which the vast majority of brands do, especially with the Shopify checkout, everybody knows it. If you're buying e-commerce products, you've experienced the Shopify checkout, so there's a familiarity to it.
There is, yeah.
And the brands that struggle with it are usually the ones that they've got unexpected shipping costs, unclear delivery times, or a big international cohort where there's duties and taxes, hidden fees that are getting dropped on them in checkout. Those are the brands that are actually struggling with checkout to purchase. We typically don't see the average Shopify brand really struggling there, and usually see that as something that you can ignore and focus elsewhere, typically when we go in and evaluate their Intrasite Funnel performance.
Yeah, it's amazing. I know I was chatting recently with a 3PL, and one of the comments that they were making was just like the massive increase in revenue that's happened internationally. They noticed, and going into Canada, UK, Australia, like Canada was up like 300% or something for a lot of American brands. And part of it is, and this is all part of the CRO thing. It's just like, are you using Shopify markets? I think they're part of Global E, and there's a merchant of record, and there's proper duty and tax in cart. So that takes out some of that friction point of like, especially for Canadians, because I'm a Canadian. It's like, that's the first thing we always do. I agree with you on the familiarity of Shopify's checkout and the logged in experience of Shop Pay. I think that's really important. But showing duty and tax in the cart is key. And then delivery time and feeling confident that you're gonna, if you're shipping by DHL or FedEx Express, you have the options and you have the proper SLA. There's a service level that goes along with selecting that in cart. You just feel warm and fuzzy that you're making a good decision because you're implementing some of these, these tools that are available in Shopify. Not always just for Plus merchants, but for anybody actually can get involved with markets. And so,
yeah, no, I mean, I can tell you the amount of times that I went to go buy something on a brand site that I got to check out, and I really wanted the item like this week, and I'm like, shoot, I don't know when I'm going to get it.
I know.
I could go hunting in their FAQs to figure out if they talk about delivery time. But my default is I'm going to just go check and see if this brand is available on Amazon, because I know that if they're Prime, I'm going to get it in 2 days or less. And so like, if you're a brand that's selling both on Amazon and on your D2C site, like you are competing against that. And there's a lot of value in being able to communicate delivery times clearly and having not only communicating them clearly, but also having a somewhat competitive. Does it have to be 2-day? Does it have to be same day? No, but something that's competitive for sure.
Just to add to that too, talk about shipping, and we're kind of going in more tactically right now, but Shopify just announced their connection now with Uber and Uber Direct now. And so like if you happen to run a retail location on Shopify and you want to expose the option of, 1 hour or 2 hour delivery through Uber Direct, you can actually have that as a shipping option. You have your inventory is obviously synced with Shopify through that local location. And if it's within the local delivery, all the technology in the back end is already completely dialed in now. So I'm in Langley, let's say in British Columbia, and if there's a retail store or a place I want to shop at, I could select Uber Direct. It's so neat that you have that, and boom, they pick up in your store and bring it over to your customer.
Right.
It's pretty wild. So that reduces friction.
For sure.
So my next question is more around kind of like case studies. I love being warm and fuzzy about what are other people seeing? I went to your website. There's quite a few results. You have quite a few case studies and stuff like that. Is there any one of note that you want to kind of talk about and saying, hey, here's what their life was without getting involved with you and your team? You implemented X, whatever that is. Maybe you followed your 4-step framework that we just talked about. And then what does great look like on the other side, basically implementing and researching and executing on your framework?
Yeah, so I think a good example would be Grubbly Farms. This is a brand that life before eNavi they had worked with CRO agencies previously, or at least one other CRO agency. So they had a value for A/B testing and like validating that they're actually making an impact. They're very data driven. And they had just went through some like pretty big shifts on like the paid social side, needed to switch partners up there, needed to bring in somebody to really level up their on-site experience. And so that's when we came in, and they had a lot of traffic that was not getting to product pages. And so that's where we focused, was around product discovery initially. And we invested a lot of effort into that, working to ultimately improve how users navigate through their homepage, through their navigation. If they land on a collection page, even blogs, they had a lot of blog traffic. Blog traffic can be really hard to improve the product view rate, just because there's just different levels of intent, and usually blog traffic has low intent. Mm-hmm. But there are some things that you can do to help improve that and get more of those into an actual like shopping or buying experience. And so that was the first area we focused, and we spent, I think, like the first 90 days with them on that. And then as the program evolved, we got their kind of baseline Intrasite Funnel performance above the target ranges across the board. There was maybe some underlying segments, because one of the things that we haven't touched on that we really like to do is segment down your Intrasite Funnel by different kind of segments, so that we have even further context. Because we could look at landing the product view and see that's underperforming. But if we segment down, we can get even further clarity on why that's happening or what's causing that. And some of the segments are like device type. So like mobile versus desktop, the landing page, homepage, collection, product pages, blogs, where are the users landing and how are they performing based off of where they land, the user type, new versus returning users, the channel or the source medium that they're coming from, because your email traffic is going to behave way different than your organic, traffic that's coming from search or versus your paid social. And so really understanding that can be valuable context. And that context can help inform kind of the opportunities and where you should focus efforts, because globally you could be fine. And so we started to focus in on some segments that were underperforming, continued to make improvement there. And then it got to the point where we were over a year into this relationship, and this is a brand that 60+% of their revenue is coming from reoccurring orders. We started to focus in on their subscription. Yeah. So we improved their first-time subscribers, like the amount of users that are actually opting into subscriptions, that take rate. There's been a massive improvement on that. I think when we started with them, it was somewhere around 15%, and now it's up near 45%.
Oh, wow.
And so massive improvement there. With that massive improvement, there was very little impact on churn. Like churn has pretty much stayed the same. And then we've shifted efforts further down that journey and focused in on kind of churn and opportunities there? How can we increase the lifetime value of these subscribers, keep subscribers longer, get those subscribers to upsell into bigger subscriptions? And then now we are really focusing in more narrowly on like new customer acquisition and trying to help them scale that. They've scaled pretty tremendously over the last 2 years of us working with them. And now we want to get even more scale. We're kind of pushing into, like, I would say, audiences that are further from their core customer as they scale. And so we need to figure out how to really target those personas well. And that's where we're building out kind of landing pages that do a good job of marrying the pre-click with the post-click. So that was a lot, but that's kind of the journey that we've had with this customer. And you can see how CRL evolves over time. Like, we're not only looking at conversion rate, right? We've covered a lot of different ground.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think that's you're almost like a business partner. You're like holistically looking at the business and a lot of levers, but actually but drilling down like this whole, from what I understand now, is I'm on page 2 of notes right now, but this whole intrasite funnel concept, like, it completely makes sense. I've been at Shopify for a long time, and I've never really, I understand add to cart rate and some of these things, but I never really took the intentional time or to educate my merchants about that fact, about wanting to, on a granular level, think about those sort of things. And kind of like, you can't see the forest for the trees. I think that's what happens with the marketer a lot too, is they tend to look at a lot of vanity metrics and they're rolling that up to the C-suite, director of e-commerce, or even the founder of the company. And they're kind of pushing on a lot of things. But I think marketers that are listening can have some really good takeaways from today's learning so far. Like, I think it's really, I really appreciate kind of what you're kind of sharing and what you guys are actually doing. And no wonder there's been like a lot of great success with a lot of business. I mean, I'm going to put this case study in the show notes, but there's lots of other ones too that I can see that have been, people have been wildly successful by executing, your framework here. So
yeah, we've been terrible at creating case studies.
I know, but you got a few good ones here.
We have honestly a few on there, and honestly, it's an area that personally we need to level up, because we have a lot of incredible clients that we work with, incredible results. Like, we're big on long-term relationships, and like Grubbly Farms is just an example of a brand that we're about to hit 2 years with, and not a lot of agencies reach that level of length, and especially CRO agencies. CRO agencies are often kind of seen as like, hey, 3-6 months, wave your magic wand and boom, my conversion rate doubles, which isn't exactly how it works. But it's cool to have that type of relationship. And that's one of many that we've built multi-year relationships with.
That's amazing. So what about BFCM? Obviously, there's been a lot of hype around that. I think, we're recording after BFCM right now, and there's still this holiday traffic, and then a lot of people are planning for like what their Q1 initiatives are going to be now. How can they maintain that momentum? Is there anything that you noticed from the brands that you work with? Was there anything unique about the customer for 2025 in Q4 that was maybe uniquely different? Because the reason I'm phrasing the question this way is because I'm always wondering if there's a customer expectation of a brand about how they want to do business with them, how they want to interact with the website, how they show up, customer support, multi-channel. There's so many things here. I just want to get your headspace around like what maybe you have seen in Q4, because I want to make sure if we can kind of apply that towards Q1.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question, Steve. It's one of those things where the customer, I would say, hasn't really changed that much over the years, but the market saturation and the amount of competition that you're dealing with, the cost to even get a user to your site has shifted. And so when we're thinking about like performance during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, it's really important when it comes to your website to actually have an experience that's different than your like evergreen experience, I would say.
Right.
I mean, this can work during other promotional periods, but especially for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, because users are typically coming in. They're oftentimes driven by some type of promotion, especially if you're doing a promotion during Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And so your experience needs to be crystal clear on what that promotion is. You need to be able to easily and effectively navigate the user to the products. You want to communicate the promotion, navigate them to the products, show them if you have a larger catalog, show them many products, because if a user sees more products, they're going to have a higher average order value as a result. And product discovery is a massive component of that. And so that's one of the key things that I would say. And we've done a lot of thought and effort around this with brands, is your Black Friday, Cyber Monday website is going to be different than your website, even on Giving Tuesday, the day after Cyber Monday. Like, if you're not carrying on the promotions, there should be a somewhat of a shift that happens there. We're not talking about like a massive shift. We don't want it to be like, oh wait, who is this brand? I don't know who they are. But we're talking about, navigation, like added navigation links that drive users to, specific promotions that help them think through kind of holiday gifting, those types of things. Your homepage, your homepage needs to be more like sales focused than it is like brand focused during a period like that. And so it's hard to take that and apply it to Q1.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to, but it's one thing that's really valuable when you're thinking about Black Friday, Cyber Monday, is don't be afraid to have a experience that's a little bit different than you would typically approach throughout the rest of the year. I don't know how well that answers your question, Steve.
No, it does. No, it does 100%, because it makes me think about I think the current expectations of a lot of brands right now are like, hey, I have an ad, I go to a landing page, I add to cart and they buy. Okay, great. Okay, so we understand that that flow. But I think the reality of an ad, or like the reality right now, is ad probably going to a product page, and then the person's probably now going to doing a Google search for reviews. They're probably going to go to Amazon now and do a price check. They're probably going to go to Instagram and see if there's any tagged photos. This may sound crazy, but I have funny suspicion that people are doing that. Maybe return to the site and then buy. Okay, that flow can happen. I think customers are like these tab switchers now, where people are a lot of external validation and things like that. And it's like, I guess maybe that's part of what your job is, I guess, as a CRO, and how you break this down with your Intrasite Funnels. Like, hey, wait a second. We don't want people to be, I know they're going to be, but we don't want people to be like these tab switcher people. Like, how about we figure out a way so they don't leave? How do we get more trust, or I don't know, UGC, shipping times, all stuff we talked about, that guarantee, like whatever. There's got to be ways of figuring all that out, knowing that they're kind of going out and looking for external validation. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, that is reason numero uno why conversion rate optimization is very important.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, a large percentage of your business, the smaller you are, the bigger percentage this is going to be direct response, performance marketing. Like, you're trying to drive an action with what you're doing. You're trying to get that conversion. And for many brands, and this doesn't apply to everybody, but for the vast majority of brands, you're trying to get that purchase on that first visit. Like, you need to get that on that first visit. And so that's where CRO is so valuable, because you're answering those questions that oftentimes they go and search for elsewhere, or they go to a competitor to go and kind of compare to. If you can answer those questions effectively and clearly on wherever the user kind of comes through the experience, predominantly for most brands, it's going to be the product page, could be, a custom landing page. But if you're able to do that well, you're going to have far more efficient paid social performance, performance marketing performance as a result of doing that. And so all of that kind of shift in the ecosystem that we've seen over the years, where everything's way more competitive. There's a lot of different options. There might even be multiple options to get your product, not only through the D2C site, but also through Amazon. That's where it's like, how do we make sure that we're doing a very, very effective job on our site to communicate what the customer needs to hear? Like, when the customer lands on the site, we want them to say, where has this product been? I've needed this. And if they're saying that, then we're winning. And they're not going to they don't need to go look for external validation on Reddit or whatever.
Yeah.
There's going to be some customers that do that, and that's just how they shop.
Yeah.
But if your site still doesn't devalue the value of doing CRO, because if you're doing that well, them going to Reddit is just a natural response of how they shop, but they can come back to your site and have a full understanding of the product in the way that they need to know it as your customer. And so that's what I would kind of say is it's so valuable to, to have a well done site that's speaking directly to your core customer.
Yeah. I think a lot of people need to really, my learnings, things that I've been teaching for a while too, is that it's not always a price objection. I think a lot of founders panic a lot, and they think the reasons why my conversion rate is not as great is because I'm not competitive in the marketplace. That's not really completely true.
No.
I think before you start discounting, you hit the nail on the head. You said about this whole information gap. I think it's just like, does this thing fit for whatever it is? Or like, I don't know, do they know that it ships for free? Or, whatever. Like I think that's a part of it. It's just people just don't know. They're kind of almost like they're confused, or they feel, or the person feels that there's a little bit of a risk of having to buy this because it's just not going to work for me. So,
yeah, I mean, that's the whole like price objection thing that you brought up is so important, because you'll see brands will they'll default then to, okay, we need to lower price or we need to discount more. And we see this a lot where we'll do surveys and we'll ask what almost stopped you from buying today, or a variety of different ways to try to understand friction. And oftentimes price will be the thing that rises to the top. And it could be even for a product that is, compared to the rest of the market, pretty low priced or at the bottom. People will still say that. That doesn't mean that you need to discount more. It doesn't mean that you need to lower price. That's just the default response that humans oftentimes have. And so that's where we like to in situations like that, instead of saying what almost stopped you from buying today, we'll say besides price, what almost stopped you from buying today? And force them, when they're filling out that open-ended question, not to default to price. Because otherwise you'll just get a bunch of people saying that price was their main objection. And it's usually not true. There's something else underlying that if you can get to and you can uncover, can be so valuable for not only your on-site experience, but all of your other marketing efforts. You can speak to that in your retargeting. You could use that in maybe your new customer acquisition ads. You could use that in your marketing, your email marketing efforts. There's so much value that you could get and kind of squeeze out of that learning if you can uncover it, if you can do the effort to uncover it.
Right. Okay, I have one kind of final question-ish, and it's about, okay, so CRO is important, and I understand how you break it down now with your Intrasite Funnel. I got my notes to prove it now. And I actually put this in my book that I'm writing right now, because I think this is important, and make sure you're referenced in it, because this is a really important framework. But so there are going to be a lion's share of people, let's be realists here, that are going to leave, and they have not opted in yet to any kind of communication. What's your mindset around these different tools that are available, like retention.com or OpenSend or customers.ai? There's tools now that kind of unhash, at least for American consumers, but can unhash the website visitor and reveal the email address and then sending a message, hey, thanks for visiting. You haven't legally opted in yet, but I guess America really is an opt-out legislation anyway. So as long as you have a legal opt-out, I think you can email anybody at any time for anything. But what's your mindset around, these people did leave the website, but we have a tool running right now that gives us the email address of these visitors and their full web page journey to add to cart and checkout, and we see where they dropped off, and we know who they are. They haven't given us legal ability to use their email address yet, but they're in America, so we should say thanks for visiting. Here's our brand story. I'm just curious on your mindset, because some people are totally all in on it and they're wildly successful. Other people not a hope in life by doing that.
Yeah, I would probably say if I think about my agency, we have its retention's B2B side connected to our site, and so we'll see the LinkedIn profiles of somewhere between probably 10 to 20% of those that visit our site. We don't immediately go out and message them on LinkedIn, but we'll go out and connect with them if we're not connected. We maybe add them in as a target account or somebody to reach out to in the future. So I can't say that I'm against the approach, because I kind of do it myself-ish, but I would say I think it has to be tastefully done. For somebody who's in e-com, I actually don't shop that much on websites, so I don't think I've ever gotten an email, at least that I know of, that I didn't subscribe to. And so I don't fully know what that's like. Now, I have gotten stuff as an agency owner where I was like, I didn't subscribe to this.
Yeah.
And it definitely feels weird. And so you just have to think about that and be tasteful with it. Like, if I'm getting this, how can I do this in a way that leads with value? And that sounds like such a B2B kind of thing to say, but I think you can do it in B2C and D2C and not kind of come across as it's weird. Because the average consumer doesn't know and they don't understand how the heck did you get my email. They might not even think about it. Some might just be like, oh, I guess
Whatever,
I subscribed to this.
Or spam and move on.
Yeah, they might think that they subscribed to this and they didn't realize it because they visited the site. But I would just say be tasteful.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. And I think it has to be there's a difference between kind of an opt-in and kind of thanks for signing up and welcome. And then I think there has to be a tasteful way of doing it, maybe potentially with, thanks for visiting. Because clearly they were on the website. Maybe they didn't even know you had a newsletter. Maybe they didn't even know that there was some kind of a bonus of, first-time customer bonus. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe your exit intent pop-up didn't work or whatever. And so I think that's the value maybe some people, I'm not trying to pitch it here, but I think the value for some people is that, hey, you clearly have some desire to buy these shoes. I now know who you are. Thanks for visiting. By the way, here's our brand story. Feel free to opt out if you don't want to get any more messages from us. That's the email side, but you could still use those email addresses for paid social.
Yeah.
You could still use those. You could probably rehash all that too and get their postal address and send them a catalog.
Right.
Or a postcard. And I think there's some weird there's stuff that people are doing. I know for a fact, even my wife has recently, she goes, I went to the website, but now I'm getting emails from them. That's really interesting. Even a VP in Shopify, I won't say who they are, but even they're doing is I went to their website. It's like, oh, wow, it's so interesting. I haven't bought from them. I haven't signed up for their anything. And they're using the technology to, hey, thanks for visiting.
Right.
And it works.
Yeah.
But not for everybody.
There's a reason it exists. And there's a reason why brands use it because it does work.
Yeah.
I think just like with anything from a marketing side of things, be tasteful, be thoughtful.
Yeah. 100%.
Don't do something that you would cringe at as a consumer, especially if you want to represent your brand well.
100%. So what do you think some of our next steps are? I mean, we're kind of wrapping up near the end of the show now, but I feel that there's been a ton of learnings. So, and like I said, there's lots of different people that are listening today. There's some early stage people, and I think there's some DIY things that people have learned right now about just this whole Intrasite funnel and really start understanding these 4 different areas that need to be tracked and then start being strategical about how you're actually implementing that. But those people that are in the mid-market to enterprise, what do you believe kind of the next steps are for them? How should they interact with you? Kind of next steps.
Yeah, I mean, so a great next step would be follow me on LinkedIn. So I'm usually pretty active on there. Like to write some content there to, many of it that you can take away and apply. And I think another good step, which I can share this with you, Steve, is we have a upgrade kit. It's our CRO upgrade kit.
Okay.
And within this page, there's just a series of resources that you can use to level up how you're approaching your on-site experience. So we have a one-click looker report that pulls up the Intrasite funnel for you using your GA4 data. So if you go and click through this link, you'll go to this page. There'll be a link to the actual looker report. You click there, and then literally you just select your GA4 property, and it'll populate with your Intrasite funnel data. So then you can start to see how are we performing across those 4 metrics, and then it'll even break it down by the different segments that we talked about.
Okay.
And that would probably be the best next step. If you're not familiar with Intrasite funnel, if you've never used that report, go and do that.
Okay.
And we'll include that right there within the CRO upgrade kit.
Lovely. Okay, I'll have that in the show notes then. So everything will be there, the case study, this link to that. I appreciate that because that's really cool. Being able to sync everything all up through Looker and GA, and then you can at least get a good snapshot of kind of where you're at. And then from there, it's just maybe, then maybe the business conversation can start. Where are you at today? What are you happy with in-house? How can we take over some of these responsibilities and can we run a 3-month test on something to kind of see what we can do? And I think it's really cool. I think it's it's really neat. Well, thank you again, Anthony, for coming on the show. Like I said, 2 pages of notes. Literally, I wish I had my camera on to prove it, but I've written a ton. You're going to be in my book, by the way. So that's cool.
Exciting.
It's called Thriving with Shopify. So you're going to be in there in the CRO section for sure. Flag you as the inventor of this kind of Intrasite funnel. So it's pretty cool. So thanks again for recording, and have yourself a lovely afternoon.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
All right. Have a good one. Well, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank you personally for being a loyal listener of E-commerce Fastlane. It's my hope that this podcast is offering you a ton of value through growth strategies, tactics, and exclusive insider tips on the best Shopify apps and marketing platforms, all with my personal goal to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company powered by Shopify. Thanks for investing some time today and listening to the show. I'm so proud and excited that you have a growth mindset and are a constant learner. I truly appreciate you and your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of the week and keep thriving with Shopify.